Okay, Erev Tov. So I was thinking what to speak about tonight, which halakha to talk about. You look at the parasha, there's quite a choice. There's a lot of different mitzvot, but I thought we'll go with something which we're all familiar with, but there's some interesting questions which come up nonetheless. And that is, we have one of three places in the Torah which tells us, that is the pasuk which comes up in Parashat Mishpatim, don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. Right? We know that the Torah repeats this 3 times. Why 3 times? In order to teach us that there are 3 distinct prohibitions. There's a prohibition of eating meat and milk together. There is a prohibition of cooking meat and milk together. And there is a prohibition of deriving benefits, right? Getting hana'ah from meat and milk together. Now, what's interesting is the Torah doesn't actually say, don't eat meat and milk. It says, don't cook meat and milk. It says, don't cook 3 times. Right? And we learn from the fact that it says that on a Torah level, on a Doraita level, that the prohibition of meat and milk is when it is done derech bishul, meaning when the meat, what is forbidden from the Torah to eat meat and milk is that's meat and milk which has been cooked together. Right? Chazal come along and extend that. So nobody should get the wrong idea from the Shiur. Right? Chazal come along and extend that and say, not only when meat and milk have been cooked together, can you not eat them? Not only can you not eat meat and milk that have not been cooked together in the same mouthful, but also you have to have a complete separation between meat and milk. So after meat or after milk, how long you have to wait, right? There has to be a separation there as well. The Gemara says, obviously the Chazal do not have watches, but the Gemara says that the time after eating meat, before you can eat milk, is from Seudah to Seudah. And tremendous machloket in the Rishonim. What does that mean? From Seudah to Seudah, from one meal to the next. There are those, Tosfot says, from Seudah to Seudah, from one meal to the next means when you finish your meal, then you finish the meal, and then you go to the next, you can eat at the next, which would mean that Me'ikar Adin, one would not have to wait at all. One would have to finish the meal, rinse out their mouth and wash their hands or whatever it may be, and then one could go on and eat the other type of food. That is, Tosfot says, nonetheless, and the Ramah brings that the minhag was to wait 1 hour, right? This is the Dutch minhag. There are others who say no, that from Seudah to Seudah does not just mean literally you finish the meal and start off the next one. It means the amount of time that it takes in between from one meal to the next. In the days of the Gemara, the time from one meal to the next was about 6 hours, and therefore this is where the source for those who wait 6 hours, right? There are those who wait 3 hours, which is the question that the poskim discuss. What exactly is the source of that? But in any event, that is, so those are some of the extensions which Chazal added in terms of eating meat and milk together, right? So I mentioned as well, there's also an Isur, not just eat, there's eating, there's cooking, and there is deriving benefit. So a number of questions come up that poskim deal with. What does it mean? What are we referring to when we say you can't derive benefit from meat and milk? How direct does the benefit have to be? What is included? So for example, some of the shaylas which come up in the Shutim is somebody who is working in a restaurant. Somebody who's working in a non-kosher restaurant, obviously, the shayla only begins when the clientele are non-Jewish. Right? If the clientele of the restaurant, which is not kosher and is serving meat and milk together, are Jewish, so that in itself is an isur of lifnei iver, we've spoken about in different contexts, not placing a stumbling block, not causing other people to sin. You can't serve non-kosher food to Jews. That would be a separate prohibition. But if somebody's in Chutz La'aretz, in a place where there are no Jews, or in a restaurant where there are no Jewish clientele, could a person be a waiter? Could a person be a cook in such a place where that's the only parnasah they can find, right? When a restaurant which serves non-kosher, or the restaurant which serves meat and milk. That's one question which comes up. Another question which comes up, the Tzitz Eliezer deals with. There was a nurse in a hospital, and the hospital also serves non-Jewish patients, and she has to, part of the duties is serving the food, serving the meal to the patients. And the meal includes soup, which is meat and milk cooked together. Is one allowed to do that, or does she have to find somebody else? Is that considered deriving benefit? So Tzitz Eliezer has a tshuva about this. It begins. It's always interesting in the Shutim, in the responsa literature. Sometimes the question, especially when the person asking the question knew what they were talking about. It's not just, is this permitted or not? This is the scenario. This is what I think. These are Ta'amim, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. What do you think? So this is one of those examples. But the Tzitz Eliezer writes back to the questioner. He says, Sheilat Chacham Chatzi Tshuva. Right? Your question is already half of the answer. You've suggested, the person asking the question suggested it should be mutar, again, regarding the nurse. He said this is not a benefit. And he says maybe it's permitted because there's a sveik. This is how he breaks it down. He says, two questions we have to ask. Number one, we have to ask is what is the definition of basar v'chalav? First of all, what is meat and milk? Maybe this is not meat and milk from the Torah. Maybe this is not the meat and milk for which you're forbidden to derive benefit from. And also, what is the benefit? The benefit that one can or can't get, and maybe that doesn't apply here. So he suggests that in this case, maybe each of these would not be enough in and of itself, but bringing these two factors together might be enough to allow it. Then he has a few other suggestions as well. So first of all, in terms of why would it be basar b'chalav or not? So basar b'chalav, meat and milk, we're talking about now, which was cooked together. We're talking about beef. We won't get into the question of poultry, which is midrabanan, which is a different issue. But he says, first of all, we know what happens if the meat or the milk comes from a non-kosher species, right? Comes from a non-kosher animal. So then, obviously, you can't eat it, but that would not be basar b'chalav. And certainly not the issue of basar b'chalav would not apply. It's interesting. There are those who want to argue. Right? Last night we finished the Science and Technology series. The first year, going back 5 weeks, we spoke about cultured meat, right? Lab-grown meat. So there are those who want to argue. There's two questions there. One is it kosher? B is it meat? Is it meat or is it parrot? So some want to say that if it comes from a non-kosher animal, so then there's less of a question of basar b'chalav, because from a non-kosher animal, it's not going to be again, I'm talking about a non-kosher species. A kosher animal that was not shechted kosher, we'll get to in a moment. But so there are those who want to say then it would be, for sure, would be parrot, it wouldn't be meat. Problem is, it may not be kosher, right? There are those who want to argue that if you took the cells from a non-kosher animal, it would be kosher and it wouldn't be meat at all. I think it's I think that the halachic consensus is going to be, certainly at the beginning, that would not be kosher. But anyway, that's a fascinating point. But the point is, if it comes from a non-kosher species, so then basar b'chalav would not apply. However, what if a more common scenario that it does come from a kosher animal, right? You're talking about beef, you're talking about cow's milk, right? So it comes from the kosher species of animal. But if it's not kosher, it comes from an avela. It comes from an animal which is a kosher species, but was not shechted, that is not kosher. Would basar b'chalav still apply then? So it seems to be. So this is a big machloket. It seems to be that a default position would be that it would. However, the Rambam in Perush HaMishnayot seems to indicate that certainly the Yisur Hana'ah, deriving benefit from basar b'chalav, would not apply if you're dealing with basar or chalav from a nevela. Also, the Noda B'Yehuda, who is in his notes on the Shulchan Aruch, in the Dagul Mervava, he writes the same thing. So the Tzitz Eliezer says we've got the Rambam, and then the Noda B'Yehuda, the language says we've got the Rishonei HaRishonim v'Rishonei HaAchronim. Who's greater amongst the Rishonim than the Rambam? Who's greater amongst the Achronim than the Noda B'Yehuda? Both of them agree. That's one factor we can take into consideration, perhaps, to say that okay, if it's not kosher, so it's going to be basar nevela. So maybe basar b'chalav would not apply. That is one leniency. The second one, he says, what about the question of whether it's hana'ah as well? What is the hana'ah which is forbidden? So certainly, if it is direct enjoyment, if it is direct benefit, meaning you have this meat and milk which was cooked together in front of you, right, and you're going to sell it to somebody, sell it to a non-Jew, because you wouldn't sell it to a Jew because that's lifnei iver, right? That would be hana'ah, that would be benefit. If you have some, you're using the actual tangible physical substance, it's meat and milk that was cooked together, and those ingredients somehow form some sort of cosmetic or some sort of medicine or something like that, that would be hana'ah. That certainly everybody agrees. But what if it's a little bit further removed? What if it's a bit more indirect? So the Gemara in Avodah Zarah talks about getting different cases of Isurei Hana'ah where it would apply. So, for example, we know Basar B'Chalav is not the only Isur Hana'ah in the Torah. There is Avodah Zarah, for example, Yei Nesech, Kilayim, right, forbidden mixtures, all of these things. So the Gemara says, if somebody hires you to go and to carry around some barrels of Yei Nesech, right, would that be permitted? You're not drinking the Yei Nesech, you're not doing anything with it, but you are getting money, you're getting paid, you're deriving some sort of benefit from the fact that it's there, you're moving these barrels around. The Gemara says that would be forbidden. The Gemara even goes so far as to suggest it's a machloket, but what if somebody pays you to take the barrels of Yei Nesech and to empty them out? Somebody's got these barrels of wine, all they want is to throw them away, they just want to use the barrels again. It says that even there's an opinion that would be forbidden. Why? Because you want if the wine was to spill out by itself, you wouldn't be able to do the job. You wouldn't get the money. Therefore, you want it to be there so that you can throw it away. That's what's called rotzeh b'kiyumo, that you want it to exist, and therefore that is some level of benefit. We find the same thing by Pesach, by Chametz, that if it says in the Shulchan Aruch that if a person wants to rent their kelim, their utensils, which they won't use for Pesach, to a non-Jew who's going to cook in them chametz over Pesach, that is forbidden. Why? Because rotzeh b'kiyumo, because you want the chametz to exist. Because if there was no chametz, the pots themselves would be burnt, and they would it would ruin them, and therefore that would be forbidden. So, do we extend all of that, these sort of intangible, these indirect forms of benefit, to basar b'chalav as well? So there are poskim who say no. No, we don't. In those cases, chametz on Pesach is in a so karet. So it's more severe. In terms of Yei Nesech and in terms of Kilayim, those are cases where you would have to, things which are connected to Avodah Zarah, things which you would have to destroy, things where there is a problem of rotzeh b'kiyumo, that you don't want this substance in the world. You can't get any benefit. Basar b'chalav, theoretically, person just put it to the side, locked it away somewhere. You don't have an obligation to destroy it, right? You could put it on the side somewhere where no one's going to eat it. You could lock it away, and that would be fine. And therefore, says the Makor Chayim, so a number of poskim, that if it is this indirect, intangible sort of benefit, that's not what we're talking about. That would be permitted. So says the Tzitz Eliezer, we've got here a sveika. Says number one, you got the fact that maybe it's not basar b'chalav because it's basar nevela, and therefore it's not included. Number two, maybe it's not hana'ah. This is not the hana'ah which is forbidden. He says number three, he says that it's very interesting, right? We said the Torah wrote 3 times that don't cook basar b'chalav. Why did the Torah tell us not to cook basar b'chalav? We know not to eat. Other isurei achila, Torah just tells us don't eat. It doesn't say don't cook them. So the Kesef Mishnah says that maybe the reason, this is a case whereby the Torah said, don't cook it, in order that you won't come to eat it. Right? We know in many cases we have it says in Pirkei Avot, Asu siag la Torah, Rabbanan come along and make it gzerah. There's a certain thing the Torah says keep Shabbat, right? You can't do certain melachot. Rabbanan come along and say, muktzeh, akli shemelachto le'isur, don't even move it, don't even carry the item so that you won't come to the melacha. There are certain cases where the Torah itself places a fence, where the Torah itself makes a gzera, it's still an independent isur, right? So the Torah says another example of this might be Pesach. We mentioned Pesach, you can't eat chametz, says the Torah. Don't even own chametz in your property, in your possession. Why? In order that some explain, in order that you won't come to eat it. Still, even if you won't eat it, you aren't allowed to. Once the Torah said it, so it's an independent prohibition. Same thing over here. Once the Torah said it, you can't cook basar b'chalav. But it might be, says the Kesef Mishnah, that the reason the Torah said don't cook basar b'chalav is so that you won't eat it. So there are those who say that since the reason you can't cook basar b'chalav is that you might come to eat it, that if it was a non-Jew who went and cooked it, that the Isur over here would not apply, and that the Isur Hana'ah would not apply on that basar b'chalav. Now, we wouldn't rely on that by itself. But says the Tzitz Eliezer, bringing all these 3 factors together, he thinks that this is okay, and he thinks it would be permitted for this person, for this nurse, to go and to serve the soup to the patients, even though it's got basar b'chalav. He says, furthermore, more than that, a number of other reasons. He says also over here, it's not really considered that you want. That you're getting any benefit from the basar b'chalav. First of all, you don't own it. You have no monetary interest in it. It's something that the hospital has. You're putting it in front of the patient. Also, the patient can decide. He may eat it. He may not eat it. The nurse who's giving it to him has no interest in that he's bedavka going to eat that basar b'chalav. So taking all these factors together, he says, therefore, this would be allowed. It might be as well that it's not basar b'chalav in the first place from the Torah, because we said from the Torah said basar b'chalav is only derech bishul, only when it's been cooked together. So if you have, the hot food, the hot meat, and the hot milk that's been placed together, even if it's been fried together, there's a whole discussion. I won't go now into the intricacies of bishul. But what is considered cooking? There's cooking and there's baking and there's frying and there's all different forms. There is a discussion amongst the poskim whether frying, tigun, is that considered a bishul or not? That might be another element of leniency. So the bottom line over there, in that situation, it was allowed. In the question about the waiter and the cook in the restaurant, so certainly if the person is the cook, they would have to avoid cooking basar b'chalav, because that in itself is the issur. If it's just serving it, based on the same sort of logic that we've said, that serving it to non-Jews would not be a prohibition. Of course, the person has to be careful not to cook it, not to taste it. Better to get a different job if they can, but if they're stuck and that was the only parnasah, then there was a leniency that was made. Rabbi Hanania ben Akasha Omer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lezakot et Yisrael lefichach b'alem Torah mitzvot, shnei Adonai chafetz leman tzidko yagdil Torah v'yadil. Amen.